The silver halls of the Kari High Council had never seen such fear. Ambassador Thaiska watched as the 12 council members sat around their crystal table, their usually bright blue skin now pale with terror. The holographic display above them showed the same terrible image that had haunted their dreams for months, another world consumed by the Vexhai swarm. Thailand the Four is gone, Council Leader Vesra announced, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 billion souls, consumed in less than 6 hours. Thaiska closed her large, gentle eyes. The Kari had always been a peaceful people. Their ancestors had evolved from plant-eating creatures on a world where predators were rare. For thousands of years, they had built a civilization based on growth, harmony, and the sharing of knowledge. War was something they read about in ancient texts, not something they lived. But the Vexhai swarm cared nothing for their peaceful nature. The enemy had appeared from the dark spaces between stars 3 months ago. They were unlike anything the Kari had ever encountered. Where the Kari built cities that grew like gardens, the Vexhai consumed everything they touched. Their ships were living things that fed on metal and flesh alike. Their warriors were mindless drones controlled by a hive intelligence that saw all other life as food. "We have lost 3 core worlds," said Council Member Thenko, her voice shaking. "Our defense fleets are destroyed. Our colonies are evacuated or dead. We have perhaps days before they reach our home system." The council chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of the life support systems. Outside the great windows, Thaiska could see the green forests and crystal spires of Kari Prime. Soon, if nothing changed, the Vexhai would be here to consume it all. "There is one option left," Vesra said slowly. "The ancient protocols speak of the Great Calling, a quantum message sent across all known space asking for aid from any who might hear." Thaiska had studied the old texts. The Great Calling was a ritual from the early days of their civilization. When the Kari first reached the stars, it had never been used for war, only for sharing discoveries or inviting new species to join their peaceful confederation. "The energy cost will be enormous," warned Council Member Zenva. "It will drain our entire planetary power grid for days." "Better than being consumed," Vesra replied. "We must hope that somewhere in the galaxy there are others like us. Species who value life and peace. Perhaps they will have the strength we lack." The vote was quick and unanimous. Within hours, the great quantum transmitters on Kari Prime were working at maximum power. The message they sent was simple and desperate. "We are the Kari Confederation. We are a peaceful people facing extinction. The Vexhai swarm consumes all life in our sector. We cannot fight them. We have no weapons of war. If any hear this message, if any value life as we do, please help us. We offer our knowledge, our resources, our friendship. Please, before it is too late." The message burst outward at faster than light speeds, carried by quantum entanglement across thousands of light years. It reached dead systems and living worlds, ancient civilizations and young species just learning to use fire. Most who received it could not help, or chose not to. But in a distant spiral arm on a world scarred by war, the message was received by a species that had just emerged from their own century of darkness. The human monitoring station on Luna picked up the quantum burst 3 days after it was sent. Lieutenant Sarah Chen was the first to decode it, working through the night in the sterile white chambers beneath the moon's surface. When she finally understood what she was reading, she sat back in her chair and whispered a single word: "War." The message was immediately forwarded to Earth Command, then to the Colonial Fleet, then to the War Council that had been ruling humanity since the end of the Great Civil War. Humanity had spent the last 100 years fighting itself across dozens of star systems. They had developed weapons that could crack planets, strategies that could break the will of entire civilizations, and soldiers who knew nothing but conflict. Now, for the first time in decades, they had a real enemy. Admiral Zhang Wei read the Kari message in his command chamber aboard the dreadnought Retribution. Around him, holographic displays showed the locations of human fleets scattered across their territory. 200 ships of war, carrying weapons born from a century of human ingenuity and desperation. "Analysis," he said to his tactical officer. "The Kari are herbivorous pacifists," Commander Rodriguez reported. "No military technology, no weapons, no understanding of strategic warfare. They're asking for allies, but what they need are—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Killers," Admiral Zhang finished. What they need are killers. The Admiral studied the star charts. The Kalari territory was 6 weeks away at maximum jump speed. If his ships left now, they might arrive in time to see the end of a civilization, or the beginning of humanity's first real war since the civil conflict ended. Send word to all fleet commanders, Admiral Zhang ordered. We have a new mission. Prep the 1st, 3rd, and 7th battle groups for immediate departure. Full combat load. We're going to war. As the orders went out across the human fleet, no one thought to warn the Kalari what was coming. The peaceful aliens had asked for allies, for friends who shared their values. They had prayed for salvation. Instead, they were about to meet humanity's children of war. The first human ships began their jump to Kalari space 12 hours later. They came in vessels designed for destruction, carrying weapons that could sterilize worlds and soldiers who had never known peace. They came with the best of intentions and the worst of methods. The Kalari had prayed for allies. But the universe had sent them something far more dangerous. Protectors who loved war as much as the Kalari loved peace. The first sign that something had changed came as a distortion in space itself. Above the emerald skies of Kalari Prime, reality twisted and bent until massive shapes began to emerge from the quantum foam. Ambassador Thiska stood on the observation deck of the orbital station, watching in wonder and growing terror as the newcomers revealed themselves. The ships were enormous, each one larger than a Kalari city. But where Kalari vessels were grown from living coral and shaped like flowing water, these craft were built for one purpose only. Every line spoke of violence. Every surface bristled with weapons that Thiska could not even identify. The lead ship alone mounted cannons that could have served as space stations. By the growing light, whispered Station Commander Melko beside her. What are they? The answer came in a transmission that filled the station's speakers with a voice unlike any they had heard. It was harsh, direct, stripped of all the gentle politeness that marked Kalari speech. Kalari vessels. This is Admiral Chen of the Human Expeditionary Force. We received your distress call. Prepare to be boarded for tactical briefing. Thiska felt her heart flutter with both hope and fear. These strangers had weapons, that much was clear. But their manner of speaking, their ships, everything about them suggested a culture built around conflict in a way that made her soul ache. Admiral Chen, she responded, using the translation protocols to speak in the human language. I am Ambassador Thiska of the Kalari Confederation. We welcome your assistance, but perhaps we could meet in our diplomatic chambers? We have prepared traditional greeting ceremonies. Negative, came the immediate reply. Time is a tactical factor. Vex High advanced scouts were detected in the outer system 18 minutes ago. We board in 5 minutes. Have your senior military commanders ready for briefing. We don't have military commanders, Thiska said softly. The silence that followed lasted long enough for her to wonder if the transmission had failed. When the human voice returned, it carried a note she couldn't quite identify. Understood. Prepare your senior leadership. Chen out. The boarding craft that approached their station was sleek and deadly, its hull scarred by what looked like weapons fire. When it docked, the airlocks opened to reveal beings that made Thiska step backward in instinctive fear. The humans were built like predators. Even in their armored suits, she could see the muscle beneath, the quick movements that spoke of creatures designed to hunt and kill. Their eyes moved constantly, cataloging threats and weaknesses. Most disturbing of all, they carried weapons as naturally as Kalari carried growth tools, as if violence was simply another function of their bodies. Admiral Chen was a woman of middle years, her dark hair streaked with silver, and her face marked by scars that spoke of personal combat. She strode into the diplomatic chamber like she owned it, her officers flanking her in a formation that Thiska recognized from ancient military texts. Ambassador, the Admiral said, offering what Thiska supposed was meant to be a polite nod. Sit rep on enemy capabilities. Numbers, weapons, tactics, everything you know. Thiska gestured to the conference table where she had arranged traditional greeting gifts, crystallized fruits and data tablets containing Kalari poetry. Admiral Chen ignored them completely, instead producing a holographic projector that filled the air above the table with tactical displays. The Vex High, Thiska began carefully, are a hive-minded species. They consume organic and inorganic matter to fuel their expansion. Their ships are living organisms that— Bioships, interrupted Commander Rodriguez, Chen's tactical officer. Self-healing hulls, organic weapons systems, predictable. What about their ground forces? Ground forces? Thiska felt confused. They don't invade. They simply consume everything. The entire planetary biosphere is absorbed into their ship organisms. The humans exchanged glances that Thiska couldn't interpret. There was something in their expressions that made her skin crawl. Not fear, but something almost like excitement. "Show us the tactical recordings," Admiral Chen ordered. With trembling fingers, Thiska activated the holographic display. The chamber filled with images from the fall of Thailand 4, HFY bioships descending like a plague of living asteroids, their consumption beams stripping away atmosphere and surface matter in great spiraling clouds. "Impressive," murmured Lieutenant Commander Park, Chen's weapons specialist. "Molecular disassembly on a planetary scale. But look at the pattern distribution. See the gaps in their coverage? 30-second intervals," Rodriguez agreed. "Probably recharge cycles for the main consumption arrays." "Exploitable," Chen concluded. "What about their sensor capabilities? How do they track targets?" Thiska stared at them in growing horror. While she watched the death of billions of her people, these humans were analyzing it like an engineering problem. They spoke of exploitation and tactical advantage while Kari children died in the recordings. "You're talking about fighting them," she whispered. "Admiral." Chen turned to look at her directly for the first time. "Ambassador, that's what we do. Your people called for help against an enemy that wants to exterminate you. We're here to exterminate them first, but surely we can find another way. Communication? Negotiation? Perhaps they can be redirected to uninhabited systems where—" "Negative." Chen's voice cut across her words like a blade. "The HFY are an existential threat to all non-hive life in this galactic sector. They cannot be reasoned with, redirected, or contained. They can only be destroyed." The Admiral stepped closer, and Thiska could see herself reflected in the human's dark eyes. "Ambassador, your people asked for allies. What you got were soldiers. We're going to save your civilization, but we're going to do it our way. The only way that works against an enemy like this." "What way is that?" Thiska asked, though she feared the answer. Admiral Chen smiled. And it was the most terrifying expression Thiska had ever seen on a sentient face. Total war. Outside the station, more human ships continued to emerge from jump space. Each one was a monument to military engineering, bristling with weapons that the Kari couldn't even comprehend. In the distance, the first HFY scout ships appeared as dark spots against the stars. The peaceful Kari had prayed for salvation. Now they were about to learn what salvation looked like when it came wearing the face of war. The HFY assault on Thys Prime began exactly as Admiral Chen had predicted. The hive mind always followed the same pattern. Scout ships to map defensive positions, followed by the main consumption fleet. What the swarm didn't expect was to find the peaceful world bristling with human military technology. Captain Maria Santos crouched in her combat armor behind a barrier that hadn't existed 12 hours ago. The humans had worked through the night, installing defensive positions that turned the planet's capital city into a fortress. Gravity wells to trap enemy ships, quantum mines that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, and weapons platforms that could punch holes through reality itself. "Contact in 30 seconds, her tactical display announced. Around her, the enhanced Marines of the 3rd Assault Regiment checked their weapons one final time. These weren't the same humans who had fought in the Civil War. They were something new, something shaped by a century of conflict into perfect killing machines. Santos had been fighting since she was 16. The Civil War had taken her family, her homeworld, and most of her original body. What remained was more machine than flesh, her nervous system enhanced with quantum processors that let her think at the speed of combat. She was humanity's answer to the question of what happened when war became evolution. Above them, Kari civilians huddled in shelters, praying to their growth gods for deliverance. They didn't understand that deliverance was about to arrive wearing the face of demons. The first HFY bioship descended through the atmosphere like a falling cathedral. It was beautiful in its alien way, a living work of art shaped by millions of years of evolutionary pressure. Its consumption beams began to carve geometric patterns in the city's outer districts, turning matter into energy with casual efficiency. That was when Admiral Chen's fleet opened fire. The orbital bombardment lit up the sky like a second sun. Particle beams that existed outside normal spacetime converged on the bioship's hull, followed by gravitational torpedoes that created temporary black holes in its living flesh. The Vexhai vessel actually screamed, as its bio-neural networks overloaded, but it didn't die alone. Multiple contacts, Santos shouted into her comm. Drones incoming! The bio-ship vomited forth its payload as it died. Thousands of Vexhai warrior drones, each one a perfect killing machine evolved over eons of consumption. They fell like a rain of chitin and claws, their hive minds already adapting to the unexpected resistance. Santos felt the familiar rush of combat hormones flooding her enhanced bloodstream. This was what she had been made for, not the clean orbital battles of space warfare, but the intimate brutality of close combat. Around her, 30 Marines prepared to hold a line against an enemy that had devoured civilizations. Light them up, she roared. The defensive line erupted in violence that would have been impossible for baseline humans to comprehend. Plasma rifles that fired contained stars, gravity hammers that turned bone to powder, and neural disruptors that shut down hive-mind connections at the cellular level. The humans had learned war from their own species, beings who had spent a century perfecting the art of killing other humans. The Vexhai had never faced anything like them. A warrior drone the size of a small building charged through the defensive fire, its armor shrugging off plasma bolts that could have destroyed a tank. Santos met it head-on, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to slide beneath its grasping claws. Her gravity hammer connected with its center mass, and the creature simply ceased to exist in any meaningful way. Pattern recognition, she called out to her squad. They're learning our tactics. Switch to chaos protocols. The Marines immediately abandoned their coordinated fire patterns, each one adopting seemingly random combat behaviors. It was a tactic born from humanity's civil war, when human fought human and both sides could predict each other's moves. Against a hive mind that learned by observing patterns, chaos was the only effective strategy. In orbit, Admiral Chen watched the battle through quantum sensors that let her observe events at the molecular level. The Kari observers beside her on the bridge had long since stopped watching, their peaceful natures unable to process the violence below. Bioship thermal signatures indicate panic responses, reported Commander Rodriguez. They're trying to retreat. Negative, Chen replied. No survivors. This can't be a learning experience for the hive mind. The human fleet pursued the fleeing Vexhai ships with the relentless efficiency of practiced killers. Quantum torpedoes that ignored conventional space folded the enemy vessels inside out. Stellar manipulation arrays turned the system star into a focused weapon, bathing the bioships in radiation that cooked them from the inside out. But it was on the planet's surface that the real horror began. Santos and her Marines had moved beyond mere defense. They were now hunting the surviving drones through the city's ruins, studying their biology in real time and developing new ways to kill them. Human medical scanners analyzed Vexhai neural pathways, while human weapons specialists field-tested ammunition designed to exploit specific biological weaknesses. Acid-based neural system, Santos reported as she dissected a still-living drone. Carbon-silicon hybrid bone structure, distributed consciousness nodes in the thoracic cavity. Within minutes, human fabrication units were producing specialized ammunition, acid-dissolving rounds for the neural system, resonance weapons tuned to shatter silicon-carbon matrices, neural scramblers that turned the drone's own consciousness against them. The humans didn't just fight the Vexhai. They learned from them, adapted to them, and then evolved past them in real time. It was biological warfare at its most fundamental level, not just the competition between species, but the active improvement of one species through the destruction of another. Ambassador Theska watched the aftermath from her orbital station, her gentle soul reeling from what she had witnessed. The Vexhai were gone, their bioships reduced to cooling debris in space. But the humans remained, and in many ways they were more terrifying than the enemy they had destroyed. She had seen Captain Santos emerge from the ruins of the capital, her armor covered in the biological fluids of creatures she had killed and dissected. The human's eyes held the light of someone who had found their true purpose in life. And that purpose was violence elevated to an art form. The Kari had been saved, but watching the humans celebrate their victory with the same enthusiasm they brought to battle, Theska began to wonder if salvation had come at a price her people were prepared to pay. The humans weren't just soldiers. They were evolution itself, wrapped in armor and pointed at the enemies of those too weak to protect themselves. And now they were here in Kari space with nothing left to fight, nothing except whatever came next. The human war machine didn't stop with one victory. Within days of the battle at Thys Prime, Admiral Chen's fleet had begun what they called active reconnaissance into Vex-High territory. Ambassador Thiska learned this during a briefing that she hadn't been invited to, but had insisted on attending. The hive mind operates from 17 primary bioworlds, Commander Rodriguez explained to the assembled human officers. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of Vex-High space, with red markers indicating major population centers. Each world contains approximately 2 billion individual organisms, with the Queen Mind housed on the central world designated Target Alpha. Sterilization protocols? Asked Captain Santos, her combat armor still stained from the previous battle. Full spectrum, Admiral Chen replied without hesitation. Biological, nuclear, gravitational, and temporal weapons authorized. No organic matter survives. Thiska felt her blood chill. Admiral, surely you don't mean to destroy entire worlds? There might be other species being held captive or negative. Chen's response was immediate and final. Biological analysis of captured drones shows no foreign genetic material. The Vex-High consume everything. Any other species in their territory is already dead. The Admiral turned to address her officers, effectively dismissing Thiska's concerns. Lieutenant Commander Park, status on the new weapon systems? The bioplague is ready for deployment, Park reported with the same tone she might use to discuss the weather. It's designed to target the specific protein chains that allow hive mind communication. Exposure time to full neurological breakdown is approximately 6 hours. Thiska stared at the human officers in growing horror. They were discussing genocide with the clinical detachment of gardeners planning to remove weeds. A bioplague? You're talking about biological warfare? Captain Santos turned to look at her, and Thiska saw something in the human's eyes that made her step backward. It wasn't cruelty. It was the absolute certainty of a predator who had found its natural prey. Ambassador, Santos said quietly, your people spent 3 months watching the Vex-High consume entire civilizations. You saw them strip the flesh from worlds and turn living beings into raw materials. And now you're concerned about the ethics of our response? But to create a weapon that destroys their ability to think is exactly what they deserve, Admiral Chen interrupted. The Vex-High made their choice when they decided to view all other life as food. We're simply completing the natural order. The briefing continued with discussions of tactics that would have been unthinkable to the Kalari just weeks before. Stellar manipulation to turn stars into weapons. Quantum viruses that would corrupt the bioship's living computer systems. Temporal displacement fields that would age Vex-High warriors to death in seconds. But it was the psychological warfare that truly terrified Thiska. We want them to know we're coming, Admiral Chen explained. Fear disrupts hive mind efficiency. We'll start with the outer worlds and work our way inward, broadcasting recordings of each victory to the remaining populations. The bioplague ensures they'll maintain individual consciousness during the final stages, added Dr. Williams, the fleet's xenobiologist. They'll die as individuals, not as part of the collective. Maximum psychological impact. Thiska left the briefing feeling physically ill. The humans weren't just planning to defeat the Vex-High, they were planning to teach the galaxy what happened to species that threatened those under human protection. It was deterrence through demonstration, written in the blood of entire worlds. The first strike came 3 days later. The Vex-High outer world of designation, Harvester 3, had been a consumed planet. Its original ecosystem replaced by vast biofactories that grew new warrior drones. It had a population of approximately 3 billion organisms, all connected to the greater hive mind. Admiral Chen's attack fleet emerged from jump space like avenging angels. But instead of immediately destroying the planet, they began with something far more insidious. Deploying bioplague, reported Lieutenant Commander Park from the bridge of the Retribution. Dispersion pattern optimal. Infection vector active. The weapon spread through the planet's atmosphere like morning mist, invisible and odorless. But as it touched the Vex-High bionetworks, it began its terrible work. The protein chains that allowed individual drones to connect to the hive mind started to break down, isolating each organism in its own consciousness for the first time in millions of years. Thiska watched the process through the fleet's sensors, and what she saw would haunt her for the rest of her life. Billions of creatures who had never known individual thought suddenly found themselves alone in their own minds. They began to scream, not with voices, but with bioelectric discharges that lit up the human sensors like fireworks. Target is experiencing optimal psychological breakdown, reported the fleet's tactical officer with professional satisfaction. Individual consciousness manifestation at 97%. For 6 hours, the Vex-High on Harvester 3 existed as individuals. They felt fear, confusion, and isolation for the first time in their species' existence. They understood in those final hours what it meant to die alone. Then the neural cascade reached critical mass, and 3 billion minds simply stopped functioning. But Admiral Chen wasn't finished. "Gravitational charges armed," announced the weapons officer, ready to demonstrate consequence escalation. The planet didn't just die, it was unmade. Human gravitational weapons compressed Harvester 3 into a sphere of super-dense matter the size of a city, then released it in an explosion that could be seen from neighboring star systems. Where once there had been a world, now there was only an expanding cloud of particles and a message broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Admiral Chen of the Human Expeditionary Force. The world you are observing was designated as hostile to non-hive life. It has been removed from existence. Surrender is not accepted. Compliance is not possible. You have been classified as an extinction-level threat and will be processed accordingly. This message will be repeated with each subsequent world until your species no longer exists." The message was transmitted in 17 different languages, including Vex-High biolinguistic patterns that the humans had decoded from captured organisms. There was no negotiation offered, no terms proposed. It was simply a statement of inevitable fact. In the depths of Vex-High space, the Queen Mind received the message and understood for the first time in her species' existence what it meant to feel fear. The hive had consumed 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 species, but they had never encountered anything like humanity. The humans didn't just fight, they evolved in real time, turning warfare itself into a form of directed evolution. They took the violence that the Vex-High represented and refined it, improved it, turned it into something that even a hive mind could not comprehend. Ambassador Thiska stood on the observation deck of her station, watching the light from Harvester 3's destruction reach them across the void. Beside her, Admiral Chen waited patiently for her reaction. "You're not saving us," Thiska whispered finally. "You're using us as an excuse." Admiral Chen considered this statement for a moment before nodding. "Perhaps. Does that change the outcome? Your people will live. The Vex-High will not. Everything else is philosophy." As the human fleet prepared to jump to the next target, Thiska realized that her people's prayers had been answered in the most terrible way possible. They had asked for allies, for beings who shared their values of life and peace. Instead, they had summoned something far more dangerous. Protectors who loved war as much as the Kari loved peace, and who would reshape the galaxy in their own image to keep their charges safe. The hunt for the Vex-High Queen Mind had begun. The final assault on the Vex-High Queen world came not as a battle, but as an execution. Admiral Chen's fleet emerged from jump space in perfect formation, their ships arranged in a pattern that Thiska's tactical computers identified as a human funeral formation, a final honor for the enemy they were about to erase from existence. Ambassador Thiska stood in the observation lounge of her transport vessel, watching the human war machine prepare for its last act of violence. Over the past month, she had witnessed the systematic destruction of 16 Vex-High worlds. Each death had been more efficient than the last, as the humans refined their methods of extermination into an art form. "All Kari vessels maintain safe distance," Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication system. "Final sterilization protocols in effect. No organic matter will survive the next 30 minutes. The Queen world hung before them like a cancerous growth on reality itself. It was massive, larger than any planet had a right to be. Its surface a writhing mass of bioneural networks that pulsed with the thoughts of the last remaining Vex-High minds. Trillions of organisms lived on its surface, all connected to the ancient Queen Mind that had guided the swarm's expansion across the galaxy for millennia. But Thiska could see the fear in its bioelectric patterns. The Queen Mind knew what was coming. Captain Santos appeared on the bridge of the Retribution, her enhanced features calm and focused. She had led the ground assaults on 6 of the consumed worlds, each time developing new methods of killing Vex-High that were somehow more terrible than the last. The humans called her a specialist, a term that apparently meant someone who had turned murder into a science. "Bioplague dispersal complete," Santos reported. Neural isolation beginning in 3 minutes. Temporal. Displacement charges armed, added. Lieutenant Commander Park. Stellar manipulation. Array ready for final sequence. Admiral Chen nodded with the satisfaction of a craftsman about to complete her masterpiece. Execute Operation Omega. Show them what humanity does to species that threaten our allies. Thaiska watched in horrible fascination as the human fleet began its final demonstration. The bioplague spread across the Queen World's surface, severing the connections between individual organisms and their collective consciousness. For the first time in millions of years, the Vexhai Queen Mind found herself alone in her own thoughts. But this time, the humans had added a new element to their weapon. Memory cascade initiated, Dr. Williams reported from his laboratory ship. The Queen is now experiencing the individual death of every organism we've killed. Thiska felt her soul recoil from the implications. The humans had somehow forced the Queen Mind to experience the death of every Vexhai in personal, individual detail. Trillions of deaths, each one felt as if it were her own body dying, her own consciousness ending. The Queen World began to convulse as its ruler went insane from the weight of genocide. Temporal displacement in 30 seconds, announced Park. All Vexhai biomatter will be aged to death simultaneously, but Admiral Chen held up a hand. Delay execution. I want to speak with her first. The communication array locked onto the Queen Mind's bioneural frequency, and suddenly the bridge was filled with a voice that spoke in harmonics of pain and terror. Why? The Queen Mind whispered across space. We only followed our nature. We consumed to survive, as we always have. Why do you make us suffer? Admiral Chen's response was delivered with the cold precision of a judge pronouncing sentence. Because you made the mistake of threatening those under our protection. Because you viewed peaceful species as food. Because in a galaxy full of wonders you chose to be nothing but a mouth that devours. Your nature is extinction. Ours is war. Guess which one wins? We could have shared the galaxy, the Queen pleaded. You take the worlds you want. We take the rest. Coexistence is possible. Negative, Chen replied. You had your chance for evolution. You chose consumption over cooperation, extinction over expansion. The galaxy doesn't have room for both predators and prey. We're making sure the predators win. The Admiral gestured to Park, who activated the temporal displacement field. The effect was immediate and absolute. Across the Queen World's surface, every Vexhai organism aged rapidly through its entire life cycle in seconds. Birth, growth, maturity, decay, and death compressed into heartbeats. The writhing bio-network stilled as their cells simply forgot how to maintain life. The Queen Mind's final transmission was a sound that no organic throat could have made, the death cry of an entire species, echoing across space. Then, silence. Admiral Chen turned to address the assembled fleet. Vexhai hive mind eliminated. All bioships neutralized. Sector sterilization complete. Mission accomplished. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Thiska had ever witnessed. The humans didn't just celebrate victory. They celebrated the successful application of violence as a tool of policy. They had taken war and refined it into something that could solve any problem, eliminate any threat, protect any ally. And now they were here to stay. The months that followed brought changes to Kalari society that Thiska could never have imagined. Human military bases appeared on every major world, ostensibly for protection but really as a statement of presence. Young Kalari began studying human military philosophy, drawn to the certainty that violence offered in an uncertain universe. The humans established trade relationships, but the goods they offered were all related to war. Defensive systems, weapons technology, tactical training programs. They were transforming the peaceful Kalari into something harder, something more capable of survival in a galaxy, where violence was the ultimate arbitrator. They're changing us, Thaiska confided to Council Leader Vesra during one of their private meetings. Our children ask questions about weapons. Our scientists study human military technology. We're becoming like them. Vesra, whose scales had grown darker with stress over the past year, nodded grimly. Perhaps that's what survival requires. The humans have shown us what the galaxy is really like. We can adapt or we can become extinct like the Vexhai. But at what cost? Thaiska asked. We prayed for allies who would help us remain who we are. Instead, we found protectors who are changing us into who they need us to be. The final meeting between Admiral Chen and Ambassador Thiska took place in the orbital station above Kari Prime, in the same chamber where they had first met. But the room had changed. The crystallized fruits and poetry tablets had been replaced by tactical displays and weapons schematics. Your people are adapting well, Admiral Chen observed as she reviewed reports on Kari military development. Your new defense grid should be operational within the year. The training programs are producing competent tactical officers. You'll be able to defend yourselves against most conventional threats. And what about unconventional threats? Thaiska asked. What happens when something appears that our weapons can't handle? Admiral Chen smiled, and Thaiska realized she no longer found the expression terrifying. That fact itself was terrifying. Then you call us, the Admiral said simply. That's what allies do. We handle the threats that are too big for our friends to manage alone. And in return, you give us a purpose. You give us someone to protect. You give us a reason to keep our weapons sharp and our fleets ready. Admiral Chen stood to leave, then paused at the door. Ambassador, your people prayed for allies. What you got were guardians. We'll keep you safe from anything the galaxy throws at you. But safety always comes with a price. What price? Thaiska asked, though she already knew the answer. You'll have to become strong enough to deserve our protection. The galaxy is full of things like the HFY. Some of them might be worse. When they come, you'll need to be ready to stand beside us, not behind us. After Admiral Chen left, Thaiska stood alone in the chamber, looking out at the stars. In the distance, she could see the lights of human patrol ships, maintaining their eternal vigilance against threats that might never come, or might arrive tomorrow. The Kari had prayed for allies and received protectors. They had asked for help and been given guardians who would reshape their entire civilization to keep them safe. They had sought salvation and found it wearing the face of war itself. The irony was that it had worked. The Kari were safe, perhaps safer than any species in the galaxy, but they were no longer the same people who had first sent that desperate message into space. They had become humanity's children, taught to value strength over peace, survival over principles, and perhaps in a galaxy where things like the HFY existed, that was the only prayer that ever really got answered. The universe had sent them exactly what they needed, even if it wasn't what they had wanted. Sometimes salvation came with teeth and claws and weapons that could crack worlds. Sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to become very, very good at war.